fine Sunday afternoon, a bright young man by the name of Sir Greg Winter was sitting in an orchard when he spotted a black-spotted butterfly dangling from a flower mere inches from his balding, and might I add, magnificently shiny head. Greg was perplexed by this black spot on the butterfly's wing. He was curious as to what caused it to be the way that it was. He devoted his life to the study of this pigment. He identified the molecule that was responsible, sequenced the gene that made the protein that made the color, and in so doing, he discovered a protein family called the lipocalins. He found that this family of proteins had these long, branching, loopy arms that were really quite variable, and they could bind to essentially anything. Now, many of us know that one of the ways our immune system deals with viruses and bacteria is by creating these proteins called antibodies that also have these loopy sections that can bind to essentially anything, and to bind to the viruses and bacteria that might wish to do us harm. And just like these antibodies, the loopy arms of these lipocalin proteins that Greg discovered could be modified by humans into infinite combinations to bind to and kill anything that we wish in our own bodies. Not just viruses and bacteria, but cancer cells. Cancers that our immune system would otherwise be blind to. To reiterate, this protein pigment that colors the spot of a butterfly's wing behaves similarly to the antibodies of our immune system that bind to viruses and bacteria. But unlike antibodies, which are large, clumpy molecules, lipocalins are small, contained. And unlike antibodies, which are too large to pass through the blood-brain barrier, lipocalins can. And because of this small difference, because of their ability to pass into the brain, lipocalins can be used to target diseases that antibodies cannot. And for millions of people around the world, with brain cancers like glioblastoma, and neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's and multiple sclerosis, lipocalins offer hope where it would otherwise be non-existent. Now, let's take a step back in time. Hundreds of years before the discovery of lipocalins, on another fine Sunday afternoon, a bright young man by the name of Sir Isaac Newton was sitting beneath an apple tree, when, unbeknownst to him, an apple dropped upon his head. Well, perhaps initially he was pondering the existence of the universe, or maybe squandering some time, or perhaps wondering if he would ever get laid, and spoilers, he didn't. When he became dismayed at this apple falling upon his head. Initially he was a bit annoyed at the disruption to his daydream, but then he became intensely curious as to why this apple had fallen. Why down onto his head? Why not up or sideways? And better yet, why didn't it just stay in its place? So Isaac Newton thought about this question deeply. He pondered it for hours and days and months and years upon end. He began to meet with fellow scientists and attend debates on the subject, all the while building the resolve and the determination to pursue a mathematical science of motion. And then, in a creative spur unrivaled in human history, he penned a body of work that needed no sequel. Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica. He crafted the classical equations which model the trajectory of projectiles, the orbits of moons around their planets, planets around their stars, and stars around their galaxies. His equations have been used to model the trajectory of balls in football games, the path of astronauts on their way to the moon, and the orbits of civilization-ending asteroids potentially headed for our home planet. This, my friends, this is the recurring story of invention. It is from the most abstract, the most obscure clues that human ingenuity triumphs with ideas so infectious, visions so enticing, thoughts so profound, that they change the course of human history. Every time we do fundamental science on something as abstract as the black spot on a butterfly's wing, or as ordinary as an apple falling from a tree, The human mind always searches desperately, and often successfully, for ways to apply the knowledge that we gain along the way to things that are useful to us. Things that are useful for improving the human condition. From the spot of a butterfly's wing emerges a new class of medicine. From a falling apple emerges a new way of thinking about the universe. We tend to think of inventors as a species distinct from our own. Geniuses with sudden whims of inspiration. Inspiration which we, mere mortals, can never hope to achieve. But the opposite seems to be true. While many of them are, inventors are not necessarily gifted with inherent genius. Rather, they are bestowed upon with a trainable skill, a skill instinctive to us in childhood, and one which we can cultivate again in adulthood. Curiosity. Millions of people had seen apples fall, but it was Sir Isaac Newton who asked why they fall. Billions of people had seen spotted butterflies, but it took Sir Greg Winter to ask, why are they the way that they are? Curiosity. But curiosity is not enough to sustain the inventor. There's another factor that makes geniuses of otherwise ordinary men and women, and that's perhaps, oddly, confidence. There are many of us who can't think of a single moment when a revolutionary idea appeared in its complete form in our mind. A light bulb moment. Is this because we're uninventive, uncreative imbeciles with no hope of ever achieving the grand insight of a great artist or mathematician or scientist or inventor? Or is it because when our ideas do come, we don't pursue them with the dedication and vigor and passion of those whose names we remember? We don't pursue them precisely because we lack confidence. According to historians who specialize in the development of inventions and the thought processes of inventors, invention is often an iterative process, one that builds upon, gradually, that initial spark of inspiration. But like so many of our young and insecure brethren, when that initial spark of inspiration hits us, when that silhouette or shadow of an incomplete idea emerges like a mirage in our minds, we dismiss it, ignore it, forget about it, move on. That's a stupid idea, we might tell ourselves. Many must have thought of that idea before us, we might think. And many of them would be smarter than us, more educated than us, better looking than us. Well, how the hell are we going to pursue our ideas to their limits if this is how we think about them, and by extension, how we think about our own ability to bring them to fruition? How on earth are we going to make a dent in this universe if we don't trust our own mental faculties? If, when our ideas do come, we let them pass us by as if they're just ordinary thoughts flowing in our stream of consciousness? The spark of inspiration, my friends, is not a manifestation of genius, but a precursor to it. Elon Musk, Marie Curie, Thomas Oxley, Emmanuel Charpentier were all once as clueless as we are. But for them, when that spark of inspiration hit, they did not recoil, they did not remain passive on the sidelines, they pursued their idea, they wrote it down, they believed that it was good, that they had the competence and the courage to bring it to fruition. They improved and refined and iterated their ideas until they were infectious enough to sustain entire companies and organizations devoted to bringing them to reality. My friends, to summarize, the inventor is not genius. They are just curious. They immerse themselves in the most abstract of concepts, in the most peculiar of phenomena, and pay attention to even the most seemingly insignificant or ludicrous ideas that emerge in their psyches. They are not necessarily gifted. They are just confident. When inspiration strikes, they believe in themselves and they pursue it to its limits, building up slowly that initial spark of inspiration into an idea worthy of other people's attention. If we hope to strike once again upon the genius of our forefathers, to change the world, we need to believe that we're just as good as them, if not better. If we hope to change the world and make a dent in this universe, we need to adopt the psychology of the inventor. of someone who pays attention with curiosity to the world around them, seizes the spark of inspiration as it arises, and cultivates the confidence to believe they are responsible, capable, competent, and justified in bringing that idea, that spark, to a flame. And perhaps, and I damn well hope so, our next great inventor could be one of you. Thank you.